This meeting of the Community Economic Development Committee meeting will be called to order. Mr. Hanlon, please let the record reflect that all members are present, plus President McLean is here as well. All right, we're going to start off right away with Bill 22. Mr. Hanlon, could you please read Bill 22 into the record?
Bill 22 amends the zoning map of the city of Allentown by rezoning parcel 54956720595 1811 South Glenwood Street from B4 Shopping Center Business District to an I2, and that's a limited industrial district.
Excellent, thank you. And before we get started on this, just a note for the record, this is being presented to us as a change, and the counsel of record is the firm of Fitzpatrick, Lentz, and Buba. My girlfriend will be doing a summer internship there this summer. I have checked. There is no requirement for recusal, but it was suggested by the State Ethics Commission to announce that prior to this meeting. So just for a point of record and for the official record. All right. Would the administration like to speak first on this, or would we like to have the applicant speak first on this? That works for me, Mr. Leitner. If you could just please state your name and address for the record, please.
Evening, Council. My name is Joe Fitzpatrick, and I'm counsel for RD Management, which owns the subject property at 1811 Glenwood Street, Allentown. And to Mr. Robinson's point on recusal, I'm old enough now that I don't even get to interview the summer intern, so I have not met the young lady in question at this point. So MFB Allentown is the entity that is affiliated with part of the RD Management organization. This company has owned this piece of land for over 16 years in the city. Just by way of orientation, and I asked this council have the exhibits that are,
Yes.
So we don't need to pull boards out or anything like that.
I think you should be fine with it.
Okay.
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
This is a 9.8 acre parcel immediately north of, adjacent to the Home Depot property in the city. Just by way of orientation, the point of access for the property is Glenwood Street, which is a dead end at this property. And it's an interesting part of the city because although it's busy and it's very close to the border with Salisbury and Emmaus, it's also a point of entry where one going to Home Depot has to go past the Girl Scout Council, a red roof motel with a freestanding pool structure, the ever popular Playtime Boutique, and a Girl Scout office. It's kind of a mixed bag, to say the least. The property's been zoned shopping center before for many years, certainly the entire time that RD Management has controlled the property. And it has been a failing effort to try and get retail or B4 business in there over these 16 years. What is apparent, however, that with Home Depot type use next door, with Queen City Airport immediately adjacent to the east and north, that the array of uses in the B4 district, pardon me, in the I2 district, just make an awful lot of sense. The adjoining properties are also all similarly zoned for I2, and I can tell you that the owner, the principal, who's had this for many years, and by the way, our professional engineer is Mr. Chirag Tekar, with whom I'm working. And this owner does not sell properties. This owner develops, manages, and leases properties. And we don't have a specific user right now, largely because it's B4 zoning. And we've met informally with city planning staff, with the engineering and public works departments, including traffic engineers. And one of the benefits of this location is that it literally empties out within a few yards from the I-78 on-ramp, off-ramp. So while we will work with the city and the engineers in terms of any improvements or modifications that are required, this is not a case where, whatever the use may be, you'll have a lot of traffic going through through neighborhood streets or coming into Center City from Lehigh Street, the I-78 frontage and on-ramp location just makes tremendous sense to go this way. And I don't have to get into all the why it's not spot zoning. It's not because it abuts I-2 all over the place. We talk about economic benefits, but what you will have is a for-profit business with jobs there, where right now you have a vacant piece of land that's taxed as dirt. And there's no negatives to any surrounding neighbors. The nearest homes are in Alton Park, which are on the other side of 78. And you have a very responsible, longtime city landowner who will be the developer and understands the whole game in terms of NPDES and PennDOT HOPs at the ramp. And I don't mean to make light of it, but if I sometimes as a lawyer I have to come up and sell a project very hard. In this case, I think it's a good situation for the city. It'll create jobs, it'll create revenue, and administratively, it'll take a stroke of a computer pen to include this 9.8 acres into the existing adjoining I-2 district. I can answer any questions, certainly, he's behind here, sure, I can answer any technical questions, be it related to the site, terrain, traffic engineering, but if we get this rezoning amendment approved, we have to come back to the city anyway with a full land development plan. And at this point, we have what we've given you in our package, but we don't want to engineer it any further till we get the go-ahead on the rezone.
Excellent, thank you very much, Mr. Fitzpatrick. Either member of the committee, do you have any questions for Mr. Fitzpatrick?
No, it's a go. I'm just wondering if you have any idea of what they're planning to, now that you're coming back to us for approval.
We don't at the moment. I have the ordinance here, but there's any one of a half dozen or more uses. It's a bit, in terms of the big warehouses you see around, and if I go up into central Northampton County, I have a target on my back because I represented FedEx. but I think you're looking at a building, even if it were for a warehouse or storage or logistics. Help me, Sherlock, what are we talking about, 130, 40, 50?
Yeah, something like that.
1,000 square feet, which is small by any Lehigh Valley standards. But we could do a logistics center, we could do a retail online fulfillment center, we could do a training, driver education, computer maintenance type of use. But it's that array of uses. The fact is Nordstrom is not going to come here. and that's why we're here in front of you tonight.
Yeah, I don't have any, I think it's and it's right next to the highway, so.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Reading. Ms. Knopf, any questions? for
No,
Mr.
I
Fitzpatrick?
just think bringing in revenue is always a good thing.
Excellent, and then, Mr. McLean, anything? Okay. At this point in time, I don't have any questions for you, Mr. Fitzpatrick. I might for the administration, but I want to thank you for bringing this forward and for looking at a piece of property that could use some help. So, thank you.
Does this committee make a recommendation to council at large tonight, or?
So yes, short of anything that would come up, which would create an uncertainty, which I don't foresee that, but you never can tell. We would forward this either favorably, no recommendation, or unfavorably to the entire council, which I believe would be sometime in May, since we'd be looking to have the public hearing in early May.
We're looking at May 1st.
May 1, I believe.
Yeah. So then we would look to, it would be voted on after the public hearing.
Okay,
If
but
we
I mean, does this committee make a motion to?
Yes.
To the council?
Yes, so we'll be, like I said, short of something that would make us table it this evening, which again is not something I foresee, but we would make a recommendation tonight,
Okay.
this evening.
So is it wise for Mr. Thakar and I to stick around to hear?
Yeah, it shouldn't be too much longer.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Fitzpatrick.
council.
Thank you.
If the administration would like to weigh in on this, please.
This has gone through the City Planning Commission, and they have recommended it favorably, to be approved. There are no major issues with this. It is surrounded by I-2. The only minor thing in the future to think about is increased truck traffic, but if it's 130 or 140,000 square foot warehouse, it's not gonna generate a lot of truck traffic, but that would be the only minor consideration in this case.
Okay, and, Mr. Kimberly, when I looked over the, staff recommendation for this, the only point of concern that I saw, and you sort of mentioned it now, would be the intersection, if it would result in potential, extra truck traffic. My question to you was, or is, in the deliberation that the planning commission had, was there any serious concern about that?
No,
Okay,
No.
excellent.
not at all.
And then the only question that I have remaining for myself is, and this would be a question to you and to Mr. Hanlon, since we send out the letters to the adjoining property owners. Did we receive any communication back, or did anyone attend the planning commission meeting to speak for or against the project?
Mr. Unger, Scott Unger, came and spoke in favorably,
Okay.
Because it's converting land to industrial, which is his thing. But there was no one who came and protested, and there was no response to any of the mailings.
Okay, the only one that I would have been I mean, any resident, obviously, but most of the residences we're looking at are on the south side of 78, so, but the airport authority, and we didn't receive any communication from them?
No,
Excellent.
it shouldn't impact air traffic.
I figured as much, just being that it's an adjoining property, I just was curious. Excellent.
I can, excuse me, I can tell you too, just by familiarity with the Lehigh Northampton Airport Authority and everything that's going on in Allen and Hanover Townships. We have to go through the airport with clearance, and they have FAA regulations, in addition to building heights and lighting and all that sort of thing. We've seen it before with Wawa on Lehigh Street, with the Bennett dealership on Lehigh Street. So there's another layer of protection that's established at the federal level.
Excellent.
And
Thank you.
We'll comply with all that as well.
Thank you for that information, Mr.
Sure.
Fitzpatrick, that's good to have. Mr. Greedy, Ms. Alpha, any comments or questions for the administration? Mr. McLean? All right, then I will open it up to the public. Is there anyone who has any public comment on Bill 22? Okay, seeing none, I will take a recommendation, a motion for a recommendation.
I'll make a motion that we move it forward favorably to full council.
Excellent.
I will second it.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. You guys have it. This will be forwarded favorably to the full council at a meeting established after the public hearing. So great, thank you. Thank you very much.
Council. Good night.
Okay, moving right along. Bill 25. Could you please read that into the record, Mr. Hanlon?
Bill 25 amends the general fund budget to provide for a supplemental appropriation of $22,000 from the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission to hire a professional historic preservation consultant to complete the historic preservation plan.
Excellent, thank you. Administration.
This is a grant that we received. It's a certified local government grant from the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission to do a historic preservation plan for the city of Allentown. This would be a comprehensive citywide historic preservation plan. It would be something along the lines of the current comprehensive plan that we are currently working on. However, it would be focused strictly on historic preservation. So there would be gathering of background information, there would be collecting of information and public input, and there would be goals, recommendations, and also it's a plan, so it's going to go out to about 2030 as to what the city should be doing and what issues that the city is currently having that could be solved within that 10-year time frame.
Excellent, thank you very much, Mr. Kimberly. Any questions or comments from the committee?
Just a quick
Mr. Greedy.
question. In regards to the $20,000 match from the CDBG, was that allowed it to something else and have to be transferred, or how did that one come about?
That money's already been set aside for the match for this grant.
Okay, was that in the budget, was it
It's already in the budget.
for this particular grant?
Yes.
Okay.
We anticipated this grant coming through late last year, so we already planned to set that money aside. Because when we submitted the application for the grant, we needed to have that money already allocated.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greedy. Anything further? Ms. Allen? Mr. McLean? Okay. I have one or two questions, Mr. Kimberly. The first of which is, what would be the time frame on what something like this would take once the RFP would go out, would come in, the RFPs would come in, excuse me, the proposals, we would pick someone, vote on the contract. What is a rough time frame do you think that it would take to do this?
To complete the plan or
Yes.
to bid it?
To complete the plan?
Well, we're expecting a projected start date of May 1st.
Okay.
Might be a little bit ambitious, but
I like ambition.
we will have the plan completed by July 31st, 2020.
2020, okay. How will this fit in and work with the study being done for Hamilton Street specifically?
It's completely separate,
It's completely separate.
completely separate.
Okay. And then, could you discuss some of the goals that you would be looking to hopefully accomplish with this and what this plan should have in it, basically when it's complete? So we have a sense, we know what the comprehensive plan looks like, so how would this complement something like that?
Well, what would be in the plan would be things like, should there be additional historic districts in the city of Allentown that are regulated? Should there be a better effort to nominate resources and historic districts to the National Register of Historic Places? Should the city do education, outreach to help to better eliminate the number of violations that occur? There's any number of things that could be addressed in this plan, and some things that could come out in the public, input that maybe, we're not thinking of. So it's kind of wide open as to what types of focal points will be actually in the plan itself. But that's a basic idea as to the kind of things that would be there.
Okay. My last question will boil down to, I know we've gotten a lot of response, I think it was one of the top 3 or top 4 responses with the comprehensive plan about historic preservation. So, obviously, we're a large city, we're an old city in a lot of ways, especially when you look at historic preservation, if it's just from the strict interpretation of anything over 50 or 60 years can be designated historically significant. I know the grant we got was $22,000, so that's what our match is, but do you feel that that $44,000 is enough funding to do this plan?
I believe it's enough. In discussions with the State Historic Preservation Office, Pennsylvania Historic Museum Commission, they definitely felt that if we had just matched 10% or something like that, and was putting out a $25,000 RFP for this, that it would not be enough. The $44,000 or thereabouts is sufficient. However, if we put the RFP out and we don't get responses that match that or come close, or, if we get things way over that, certainly if we get responses way over that, we're gonna have to reconsider and maybe find some other source of funding.
Okay, well, I mean, this is an exceptionally important study that will be done. I would like to thank you and Mr. Leitner and the whole staff for pursuing this grant and for identifying the funding, because this is something that I think is exceptionally important as we move forward with a lot of the development we see in the city. And I can't speak for any other members, but if this would be something where we would need to allocate more resources, I would certainly be supportive of that if we needed to look at that in next year's budget.
Okay.
So, thank you very much, Mr. Kimberly. I will now open it up to anyone from the public who might have comment on Bill 25. All right, seeing none, I will accept a motion from the committee.
I'll make a motion to move favorably.
Excellent, motion made by Ms. Hoffa,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Grady. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Kimberly and Mr. Leitner, for your work on this. Next, Bill 24. Mr. Hanlon, could you please read Bill 24 into the record?
Bill 24 amends Title 11, Authorities, Boards, and Commissions by adding Article 172, Small Business Advisory Board. The purpose of the board is to advise the mayor and council on issues relating to small businesses in Allentown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hanlon. As I am the prime sponsor of this bill, I will just mention a few things about it. over the course of the last 2 years, one of the most significant series of conversations that I have had in going out in the public is that there is a concern with small business communication in the city. And we obviously have a staff that is small and is trying to do a great deal of work with not a lot of resources. And I would like to just compliment Mr. Leitner, your business development staff. I think they do a great job for the resources that they have, and they do a really fantastic job with it. But in looking at other communities of our size, in looking at other communities just in Pennsylvania in general, something that a lot of communities have that Allentown does not have is a small business advisory board for their Department of Community and Economic Development. So this was something that I wanted to work on, something that I wanted to identify and work with, because I think it can serve as not just an advisory board for the department, for the administration, for council, but it can also serve as a two-way form of communication for the Community and Economic Development Department to get out into the business community and have ambassadors to work with the programs that we have. One of the first things that I did in looking at this bill was to sit down with Mr. Leitner's staff, and they provided some very valuable feedback on ways to make this appropriate and ways to make this efficient so that it would not become a burden on the department, and also that it would not be something where the members would not have an adequate amount to do to assist the department. And I appreciate his staff's diligent work on getting this together. The only other thing I would just ask my colleagues is to support this favorably. There are some potential language changes just to add a little bit more clarity into it being specifically an advisory board that we got from the solicitor's office this morning. I'm happy to work with the solicitor's office on identifying that language to have as an amendment for council at next Wednesday's meeting if we do forward this favorably. I would just now ask if the administration has any comments on the bill.
Mr. Robinson and committee members, I would only, as we go through this, if it would pass favorably tonight on the city council, there was some language that has to be clarified before we move forward with the advisory board.
Absolutely. And I some of the suggestions put forward by the solicitor's office, I think, have some value in terms of just clarifying some of the language and making that work. Some others I don't agree with, but most of them I do.
Yeah.
So we will make those clarifications.
And, you know, we just got this morning, and I looked at it, and Mr. Langman has not had a chance to look at it, or Mr. McMahon, so as we go forth, we will work together on this.
Absolutely.
It should pass favorably. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any comments from any of my colleagues?
Couple of comments. First of all, I like the idea, however, if it's not ready, why are we submitting this resolution, this ordinance?
In looking at the solicitor's opinion, Mr. Greedy, really the only thing of import, in my opinion, as the prime sponsor of the bill, is to add a sentence which would read, with some adjustments, the board shall serve as an advisory body only. There was some concern as to us creating a board that might be
It says
more than
advise-
advisory.
It says to advise the mayor. I mean, so it says advise in several areas actually.
I agree,
And
but
it says
if,
in the second paragraph, it says, small business advisory board.
and I agree with that, I'm simply willing to, if the solicitor's office feels that needs to be added, I'm happy to make that as an amendment at the full council meeting, since that's when we would need to amend this, just to add that again, if they feel that that would be something that would add greater clarity. I mean, the word advisory is in the title,
Yeah.
but they feel that it would add some greater clarity, and I'm more than happy to oblige in that sense.
Now, thank you,
Mhm.
Mr. Chair. The other comments I have is, I know that it says that the mayor, council would appoint 4 members, and, the mayor would appoint 3. It's a board of 7, and it also talks about where they will be located, or from where they will be located.
Yes.
From members from the east side, the south side, the west side. I'd like to make sure that it includes Center City, and I'm not sure if that means that the rest of them will be from Center City, but I'd like to include specifically Center City.
Absolutely, I would be happy to include that as a friendly amendment. The
Amendment,
purpose, just so you know, Mr. Greedy, the purpose of adding that language, and I'm happy to add that as well, was to make sure that we were not just appointing
I agree.
business owners on Hamilton or Seventh Street.
I'm okay with it. And the other issue is, and I'd like to make another friendly
Sure.
amendment to it, would be to make sure that it's a diverse, that includes a diversity of our community.
I'm happy to add language to that effect, Mr. Greedy, because I think that's a goal that we all have, but putting that in language I think is appropriate, so I would happily accept that as well.
Okay,
So if you can just get the language that you would like to see in that to Mr. Hanlon, we can add that as a friendly amendment.
I certainly will. Thank you. I think those are the only, issue, oh, no, there was another one. The other issue, the other was in the, let's see, so it would be the fourth paragraph, actually the fifth paragraph. It's right at the bottom, the last sentence in the bottom, in the first page.
Okay.
Number 172.02, the establishment composition. So it would be, it was not really clear in how the appointment would be, because it served 4 years,
Mhm.
except that initial appointment shall be so staggered that the terms of the membership shall expire each year. So I'm not sure if he's saying.
What the purpose of that is, Mr. Hanlon and I discussed this, so whenever you create a new board like this, the last thing you'd wanna have is all 7 members are up every
No,
4 years.
but-
So the idea would be that several members would have a term, Mr. Hanlon, you could probably explain this better because you've dealt with this before.
I just, yeah, I know what you're saying, but I'm saying, my idea is, would they be, at the beginning, would 3 of them be 2 years, or 3 years, or 4 years? You know what I mean? Like, usually
Right.
they determine how many members in the first year, in the first term, will be 2 years or 4 years. So that way they don't, you know, it says each year now, so it's everybody, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we basically I just basically stole this from other.
Just to be specific.
Right.
Let's say, you
I
can say
know what
like
you're
3 of the
saying.
members will be, will expire in 2 years or 3 years, and the other 4 would expire in 4 years.
Mr. Hanlon, could you work up a schedule for that and add that
Yeah, I
as
think you
language?
would have 7, or 7 months.
Yeah, exactly, so like, not
Right.
every year you're gonna be appointing somebody from that board.
Exactly, yes. No, absolutely. If you could just work up that schedule, Mr. Hanlon, so we can have that as an amendment for, the meeting that this will be voted on.
Those are my only friendly amendments, 3.
I think those add great value to the bill, and I will thank you, Mr. Greedy. Anyone else from council with any comments?
Yeah,
Ms.
I,
Hoffman?
first of all, I agree with you, Mr. Greedy, because 7 members is staggering, I'm thinking, well, every year for 7 years, you know, it's staggering. I'm glad you clarified that, because I was a little confused myself. I just want to make a statement that this is long overdue, Mr. Robinson, and being a small business owner for 37 years, I know there's, especially south side,
Mhm.
I hear a lot from the people from the south side. We have no voice, you know, we don't get this, you know, we don't get that, and I think having this gives them a reason to feel that they're important, you know, in the city of Barton. And with all the development, of course, downtown, you hear a lot, but I do think the south side suffers a little bit more, you know, and with this advisory board, we can help them in so many ways, and I think it's a great bill.
Well, thank you. And to Mr. Greedy's point, I've also had a number of conversations, and I'm sure he has as well, with small business owners outside of the central business district, but still in Center City, who feel that they are not, don't have a seat at the table. So I think adding that clarification adds value to it. I would just also like to thank, my fellow members of council and Mr. Hanlon for their work on this, and thank the administration for the effort that they put into this as well. I think that this can be an excellent opportunity for improving relations with the business community in the city. And I would now open it up to anyone from the public who has any comments or concerns on this bill. Seeing none, I will accept a motion.
I will make a motion that we vote favorably with the amendments that have been proposed and whatever the mayor indicated that he wants to amend as well.
Like jokes over there. Make sure the microphone's off.
That was funny. I'm just kidding.
Say it again.
No, I'm just saying that, to move it forward favorably with the amendment that I the friendly amendments that I proposed and, Mr. Robinson, agreed to, and also any amendment that you think can need clarification.
Gotcha.
Excellent.
Then I will second it.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed are not present, so this will move forward to the full council. We have one last item on our agenda for this evening that was added at the last minute, and that is Mr. Jennings from CACLV had asked to make a presentation concerning a new initiative that he's involved with. He was unable to make our meeting 2 weeks ago, so I allowed him to have this time. And Mr. Jennings, if you would like to begin.
I smell
We
food.
missed you, left.
I smell something.
What's burning? It smells like something burning.
Is that you having lunch over there?
I think the whole place is going up in flames.
Wow.
I thought it was your supper.
I don't have any food.
I don't either. But I smell something.
I warned you. I was like,
No, it's only right outside the door.
Yeah, I smell food right away. Like a hound dog.
the bar owner over here was like, what?
The thing is, I like burnt food. I like burnt hot dogs and stuff. I promise, it's not me. I wish it were. Plus, my phone's gonna burst into flame. Like the Note 8.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Jennings.
There's a
All
door
right,
behind it.
what I really wanted to do was fill you in, we've talked about housing in Allentown for so long, there's been so much frustration over the issue. And it is, in my judgment, as complicated and as important to the city and its future as the school district is. You could argue that the two challenges go hand in hand. And, we've had a lot of frustration with the federal government cutting HUD funding over the years, and the ability of the city to respond to the challenges with an increased low-income population, substandard housing stock. A lot of the city's housing stock is it was built before 1940, and we don't have the resources. And so we've been working on this issue for a long time. As you know, we have a neighborhood partnership program in Allentown, and we've been working on the neighborhoods surrounding the NIS, and the project is called Upside Allentown. It's a part of the city's comprehensive plan, the last comprehensive plan. And because of the complexity and the resource intensive nature of the problem, we have not put a lot of the Upside Allentown resources into the effort yet, but that's now changing. And I wanted to explain to you the strategy that we've got. I think it's a good one, and I want to make sure that I'm able to do that. What I've given you is on top an explanation of what I think the major housing-related initiatives the city should be working on as it relates to the downtown neighborhood. I think we all know that it's been frustrating that there's been no money, no investment that's walked across the street from the NIS. JB and the city and others have done a terrific job of revitalizing the central business district, but I think we're all sharing in the frustration that there has been no investment that's occurred organically across the street, literally across the street, as a result. So what I'd like to do is I brought, I'm a technophobe, and so I brought my old school audio-visual and I want to give you a quick explanation.
Mr. Jennings, would it be possible if you could actually put it on the other side, so that way, since we aren't able to record tonight, and Mr. Shoup is on the record.
Recording.
Oh, it is recording now? Oh, well, still, but then that way Mr. Shoup can get it.
Is this all right?
Sorry, Mike.
Yes, is that, if just a little bit so the administration can see it too.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so, when you buy a house, the idea is to buy the cheapest house or the least valuable house in the neighborhood, right? And with the hope that the neighboring properties are gonna elevate their property value. And conversely, you don't wanna buy the nicest house in the neighborhood because the neighbor's properties are gonna draw yours down. So that's an important key point, I think, for people to understand. But secondly, when a neighbor fixes up their property, it usually makes the neighbors look and, turn around and look at their house and say, geez, my house doesn't look so good. Well, I better try to keep up with the Joneses. And that's what typically happens in a normal marketplace. And the neighbors say, geez, I gotta put some money into my property. But it doesn't happen in the city so much because people don't have the resources. They might wish they could do something, but they don't. So I think it's a legitimate use of public and community money to invest in a property that is the worst on the block or the worst in the neighborhood and bring it up to the best in the neighborhood in order to uplift property values of surrounding properties. So, the idea, this is the high density neighborhood, we put a bunch of money into that property. Normally in a suburban neighborhood, people would start putting money into theirs. But in this case, what we started to do, we tested this on Hay Street in South Buffalo. We did 3 major rehabs, and then we surrounded those 3 major rehabs on Hay Street with facade improvements. Because when you, as a community development organization, you throw that pebble into the pond, the hope is that creates, sort of a concentric investment around it. So what we started to do was put facade improvements on the surrounding properties, basically creating our own first ripple, if you will, or second ripple in this case, right? You understand what I'm saying?
You actually did this already?
We did this in South Bethlehem,
Right,
and what we
yeah.
found, I'm sorry.
I'm just thinking that I thought you were doing this in True Street.
Well, we're gonna apply it here, yeah, that's my point.
Okay.
So in South Bethlehem, citywide, home ownership declined a few percentage points over the last several years. In that Hay Street neighborhood, it actually increased. And in fact, the new dean of the engineering school at Lehigh University bought 2 properties on Hay Street, one of which his family occupies. So it's exactly the kind of thing you're trying to get to happen. So you put these facade improvements on these properties around it, and that helps to uplift the block. Okay?
All
right, so-
Alan, just 1 second.
Yeah.
On Hay Street, it was, who put that money into that?
We did,
You
yeah, CACLV did,
Did the
or
city-
our
did the
community
city-
development subsidiary in South Bethlehem.
All right, and it was facade only.
Yeah, well, no, we did 3 major rehabs.
Oh, we did major.
So actually, who put that in, that's just a combination of some city community development block grant funds and county money and some money from our neighborhood partnership, like Upside Down Town.
So HP is the one that goes from.
It
Steel
the one that
Stack
goes
all
up
the way
over the mountaintop,
Okay, yeah.
where all the people in there,
Yeah.
BMWs come from Saucon Valley into the city. Right. It was a high profile, it was deliberately that high
By
profile.
Lehigh, I lived there, not on Hay Street, but on First Terrace.
Yeah, so, we put a pocket park in there, we have a Thai restaurant that we helped start, there's a mural on one of the houses, there's 3 major rehabs, there's about a dozen,
And this is for
facades.
home ownership, correct?
All home ownership, right. So, what we wanna do is concentrate this kind of an effort on blocks that are within close proximity of the NIS. The reason why the money from the NIS isn't finding its way across the street is because the folks on the other side of the street aren't investing, they don't have any money, and nobody wants to invest over there because they're not sure what's happening on the other side, right? So I think what we wanna do is we wanna create this kind of a dumbbell effect, where, you've got the NIS as an investment place, and then we target what we're called priority blocks within close proximity of the NIS, where we put money into these blocks and fix it up like the way I've described on the other page, in the hope then that you've got what I call the dumbbell effect. Some of the money's going this way, some of the money's going that way, and people don't feel like this is too risky an investment. Understand what I'm saying? And then then we can do another block up here to try to, and so that investment fills in the spaces in between. So not surprisingly, Turner Street becomes the main stretch for the so-called priority blocks. And we identified 12. We had loaded up the van with city staff, city center staff, our folks, and volunteers. And we went up and down the blocks looking for the kind of place where you'd have this milieu of challenges on the block. And we narrowed it down now to 2 specific blocks that we want to start working on now. And I'm not sure I'm comfortable identifying the blocks, because what happens when you say we're going to start investing in this block, suddenly prices go up? So I want to be careful about that. I mean, I probably already told you more than I probably should, but you are city council after all, you don't know this stuff. So we started, piecing together the resources.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's also going on Facebook too. It's not.
Yeah, well,
yes, it
yeah.
does.
So we want to do a worst to best house, you know, a property that's a real dog property, and fix it up and make it the nicest on the block, so it lifts up other property values. We want to do a little bit of owner occupied rehab. A lot of us are going to be seniors, people that have been in a house for a long time and you know, they've watched the world go by. And then in many of these cases, there's a multi-unit building on the block, and we've never really, as a city, put resources into investor-owned properties. And yet they're huge deterrent to investment. You know, all you gotta do is drive down a block, nice home, nice home, what's that? Never mind, I'll keep going. So we are working on a project, and we've got the resources, and I can't name the source at this point, but it's a private source, where we will provide an incentive to multi-unit investors to invest in improving the interior units, the actual apartment units. And in exchange for that, we'll provide matching funds, grant funds, to put facade improvements on the front of the building, on the apartment building, right? So we'll hopefully get better housing conditions for the people who live there, and we'll get improvements for property values around it by lifting up that property, okay? So we're talking about a substantial amount of money. I mean, these days, you get a house for $30,000, you put 130 into it or more, and you're lucky if you can get $90,000 for it. So we're talking about a substantial amount of investment.
I'd like to ask a question.
What's that?
What you just said. So, you saying that you wanna give money to a person who owns the property already, is that going to be, how are you gonna determine who to give the money? Is it part of for reserve, or is it to a person who already owns a property but is lowering?
We will approach them because it's gonna be apparent on these blocks where the problems are, right?
I'm just thinking like, I don't wanna name names, but I'm just thinking of a landlord, for example, who probably has a lot of properties in the city and has a bad property in
Yeah.
the worst property in the block, so you're gonna give him money to fix the property, or is he gonna be, an income type of basis?
Well, that's a good question. We don't want to enrich the people who are taking us down, but at the same time, we do want to make housing better, and we want to make prices rise, and, you know, so people feel comfortable investing. And I don't know a better way to do it.
But I understand what you're saying, so this would be private. This would
This is
not,
private funding.
Yeah, it's
not in
fund.
private homes. This would
Private
be home
properties.
ownership. In other words, what you're talking about, go to a landlord who's got, you would take a property that's got 2 or 3 apartments in it, correct?
Or 4 or 5 or 10.
Yeah.
Or one, I mean, it's not rental, it's home ownership.
No,
No.
in this case, we're talking about rental
Rentals, right,
apartment
yeah.
buildings.
So the idea behind this is that you're taking those rental properties and you're allowing them to have access to the type of funding that previously has been restricted just to owner-occupied housing. The idea being that the rental property is not going anywhere, it needs to be improved. So this is a way to get the rental property improved on the block as well, which aids in home ownership on the block then as well.
Oh, because with Hay Street, it was home ownership, there was
Yeah,
no
well-
rentals there.
My point is that in some of these cases, these places are already, there might be a big house that you couldn't get anybody who could afford a house that big to buy that house.
Okay.
And you can't deconvert it because it's too expensive to deconvert it. So let's get the property fixed up. Because otherwise, that property is gonna bring down all the other investment we're putting into the block, right? So that's a big chunk of what we're trying to do. Okay, so here are the resources that we're bringing to this, for now. Upside Downtown has put $190,000 into this. Keystone Communities, Department of Community and Economic Development in Harrisburg, has put $175,000 into it, or committed, we don't have the cash yet. The Century Fund has put $60,000 into it. this corporate donor we have to do the facade work that I was just talking about, $450,000. And then the city has right now about $300,000 or something to it. My hope is that you'll convince the city that we should put more into this at some point. But this is what we've got to work with for the first year. It's a pretty tiny little chunk of change, and we think we can do probably 2 blocks this way. So there's a lot of work to be done out there. We need a lot more money to do this, but the point is to be very strategic where we invest this stuff with the hope that this will attract additional private investment. You know, it'll make people more comfortable buying properties, more confident that the property isn't gonna lose value, and that the neighborhood would be better off because of it. Okay, so that's the show and tell part of it. Let me just talk about a couple of other things then. We also, you know, we've got a great opportunity in the school district's decision to build a new school on the Ritter and Smith property. And they're gonna abandon the Cleveland School and McKinley schools. Those 2 lots are perfect for new ends of the dumbbell, as I was just showing. The taxpayers paid for those properties. They're in the school district hands, but we paid for them as taxpayers. And they are now not on the tax rolls. I think what we need to do is we need to get those lots, we need to clear them, and we need to make them available, if necessary, for free to developers who will come to the city with really good plans for how to use those properties. I would argue that it should be mixed income housing, that 1 out of 10 units that you require right up front, 1 out of 10 units has to be affordable for families with incomes below 80% of the median. The other 9 can go to, you know, Donald Trump and his friends if it has to. You know, I mean people with money, not people without principles, but people with money. You know, we put a whole neighborhood essentially on that block, and that's going to put people with money in the neighborhood. And I've said this for a long time: you can't have a functioning community without a functioning marketplace. You can't have a functioning marketplace where everybody's poor. So we've got to find ways to get people with money to buy homes, invest in their homes, invest in their block, invest in their city. You know, call the cops when something goes wrong. Put your trash out on the right night. You know, send your kids to school, join the PTA. You know, invest in yourself and your family and your home and your neighborhood.
I'm sorry,
So if you, what's that?
I'm sorry, have you talked to the school district about what they're gonna do with that property?
I've had some conversations with the superintendent. I think he wants to get resources. I said, well, we already paid for that. I think we probably have to have some conversations with them about that. But I think that creates, if we keep a couple of these priority blocks, and we get the Cleveland School and the McKinley School, and the Ritter and Smith property, which is being cleared for a beautiful new school, we've got the makings of the kind of pockets of investment that need to happen in the neighborhoods in order to get real investment, real private investment in there as well. Now, if you look at this document that I have that says the challenge of housing in Allentown, on the 3rd page, you'll see where it says proposals that will make a difference. So ever since I learned about the NIDS and got myself on that board, my whole agenda was to try to find ways to get as much of that money into the neighborhoods as possibly could. We found out that it was almost impossible. Pat Brown did a pretty impressive job of making sure that money was going to be where he wanted it to be. So I've been trying to find ways, how do we drag money out of that neighborhood? Well, one way would be to go after JB. I don't think anybody wants to do that because JB's invested a lot in those properties. He's done a phenomenal job in the Central Business District. He understands and agrees with the agenda here, but JB is not the only guy that that has a stake in this. We all have a stake in it. So what I'm suggesting is that, you know, the TIF, I mean, the NIS is essentially a TIF. And what it means is you're expanding the tax base, it's growing revenue, and that revenue should be available to the city to pay for services. I'm suggesting that the city council pass an ordinance that requires some percentage, some portion of that new expanded tax base and makes it available exclusively for improving the housing stock. We need a regular ongoing flow of revenue in order to reinvest in these neighborhoods, because otherwise the central business district is gonna be this nice little jewel in a lot of rough. And so I think we've gotta find a way to get the resources to do 20 so-called priority blocks and get the kind of investment that's going to make, you know, everybody in the city better off. The second item there you'll see is what I just talked about with the Cleveland and McKinley schools. Third, we've heard a lot about inclusionary zoning. The plan for the NIS was that there should be, and this was the Goody Clancy proposal. They said, get 1,000 units of market rate housing before you do something inclusionary. Well, we've got 750, I think. And by the time we can actually pull something off, they're gonna be 1,000. So I think we ought to start working on it now. And my suggestion would be that if any developer builds or rehabs a building and puts at least 10 units in it, one of those should be affordable for moderate income people. It doesn't have to be the poorest. It could be, probably should be, but at least recognize that not everybody's got the ability to afford a $1,300 a month or more apartment. Then we've got what I was just describing with the priority blocks. And then finally, I think, and my understanding is that Mr. Leitner is already on this, which is we've got to rebuild the city's systematic inspection program. There's just too much too many rogue investors out there that are preying on this marketplace. So I came tonight to encourage you, first of all, to make sure you understood what we're doing, because I think this is good stuff. And I think this is the best way to use limited resources to create the kind of dynamic marketplace that we need in order for the city to thrive. But we need advocates on council to really push the agenda here. And I wanted to get the opportunity, because I knew the Community and Economic Development Committee is the place that has the best looking and smartest city council.
Yes, Julio and Candida absolutely qualify in those categories, so.
I second that.
No comments.
I'd be happy to answer any kind of questions or comments that you have.
Mr. Green, go ahead.
Thank you. So, when we had the meeting last year, the year before, about inclusionary housing, inclusionary zoning, you were kind of opposed to it. Now it sounds like you are proposing it.
Well, understand, I proposed that originally. I think CC got that from me. But I never saw, the inclusionary zoning proposal has been promoted as if it's the solution. In my mind, the inclusionary zoning proposal at best will get us apartments that if we get lucky enough to gentrify the neighborhood, I want to be real clear. I don't think gentrification is a bad thing. You have to have money in the marketplace for the marketplace to work. So when it gets to the point where it starts to displace people, and frankly, that would be a day of good news that is happening, then we should have something in place that starts to make accommodations for those people who might get displaced. I think it's a long way off, unfortunately, and I think we can address those concerns that are legitimate, that some people might get displaced, that they get displaced to one of those 1 in 10 units. So when it came up last year, Julio, I was saying, look, it's still a sensitive marketplace. It's still, it's not a panacea. I didn't want to see you do something that only addresses a tiny fraction of the problem and then think we really solved the problem. When you walk down the street saying, yeah, I did that, when what we did really wasn't much more than find a way to hopefully offset the displacement of people if things really work the way we want them to.
So you think that the market is ready for some type of inclusionary zoning at this point?
I think what?
The housing market is ripe for?
Well, it's pretty robust. I mean,
For some type of inclusionary housing?
My
inclusionary zoning
understanding
housing?
is that JP's apartments are filling up. And as long as they're filling up, we have an opportunity. I mean.
But as you know, I think in doing those meetings, people from city centers were opposed to it. Are they going to change? Are they changing their minds? Have you talked to them?
I haven't talked recently with him about it.
I'm just saying.
But keep in mind that JP's not the only guy, Matt Hyman is building.
Yeah, but Matt Hyman is building primarily, he's taking old factory, he's doing lower moderate income housing primarily, and it's all apartments, and it's for, you know, affordable, you know, housing pretty much,
Yeah.
apartments. No.
Another way to get at the issue might be that to be able to, make a payment into a fund in lieu of developing, an actual moderate income apartment on the same floor as people paying $1,500 a month. So that's another alternative, but you've gotta find a way
I mean,
to,
don't get me wrong, obviously pro affordable housing for people. I'm not saying that they have to be very, very low income, but I'm just saying that they have to be affordable housing for all. I'm for that. In fact, I was just talking about that this morning at the house topic, but I think the issue is, first of all, what is affordable? And second, you know, there are so many things that are being built by, let's say, J.B. Riley, and they are, what, you know, by City Center. And there are, I don't think any of it is affordable at this point for Allentown. And besides, people are saying, and I saw an article just, I think yesterday in the paper, it might have been the day before, that says that we have the highest income, the highest amount of, how do you pronounce that? The highest rent, the highest, income disparity.
Rent relative to the
disparity.
income. Right,
And that's an
we
issue,
now-
that's a big issue for Allentown. It's an issue that we need to target.
yeah. Well, you asked what is affordable, and then you went from there. Affordable is 30% of your income. And income, you know, you cannot get, quote, affordable for poor people. I mean, the only way to do that, Julio, you know, is through the housing authority.
Yeah.
Deep subsidies paid for by somebody, and we don't have the money for that deep subsidy.
But you know, at the
But
same
if you
time, we have a list, a waiting list of 10,000 people.
Right.
Right now.
Right, and that's the case all through the Lehigh Valley. So, so what we wanna do is we wanna get units down to the point where they meet the 80% threshold, but in order to get them for poor people, you have to get the Section 8 certificate, right? So without the Section 8 certificate, you know, what's affordable for somebody with 80% of the median income is 30% of a $45,000 salary. That's where the numbers work out. So, and just to be clear, we cannot develop affordable housing for poor people. It can't be done. It has to have deep subsidies. I'm not even proposing that we try to do that. It can't be done. It's
Well,
that-
in the other part of it, unfortunately, in addition to the 10,000 people, the 10,000 people waiting list in the housing authority, we also have probably for the Section 8 voucher, probably 4 a month, if that, and those are the people who actually would be moving out,
Right.
you know, and we create 4 for the rest of the people, you know, it's very difficult to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, we've wrestled with this, you know, when we were both on the Housing Authority board. So, you know, and the Housing Authority in Allentown does a great job and,
They do,
you know.
regardless of what people think.
But he's, you know, he's upgraded 2 of the biggest projects, and he's working on the next
Yeah,
one, which is
yeah.
gonna be on the other side of the news, which is a good one too.
Yeah.
So, I don't wanna stop, and if you wanna keep talking, I'm happy for that conversation. I think this is.
Go ahead, I have other comments, but.
Sure, well, we can sort of rotate it around a little bit. Ms. Alpha, do you have any comments or questions for
Yes, I
Mr.
do.
Jennings?
Alan, I'm on the fence with inclusionary zoning myself. When you started off with the Hay Street thing, because I've always been a proponent, and I still believe that in order to turn this city around, or any city, home ownership is the key.
I
And
agree
I've
with
always
that.
thought, it was a dream of mine, that developers would come in and take a block and develop it, sell it, the city works on low interest, however you can work it out, and see block by block, or house by house, block by block, become home ownership. And I think rather than, and I'm not saying, the way you explained it today, to me with the inclusionary court, sort of leaning toward it, because I I believe somebody like J.B. Riley, who has the amenities and off-street parking, central air conditioning, everything he has, and then someone down the street has a 5-story building and wants to charge the same. And this is where the problem lies. I mean, he's within the realm of what he should be charging for those apartments. And then Joe Schmo down the street has a 5-unit apartment, has no air conditioning, no facilities for parking or anything, and he thinks he can charge the same thing. And this was where inclusionary zoning had me a little off kilter. But your explanation tonight is very much where I'm coming from, where I believe that once we get these blocks and people want to own these homes, is where the city's going to, I mean, in the 60s, 50s was all home ownership, and converting to apartments is what brought everything down. So I'm really in favor of, I was very impressed, especially with, I'm from around Hay Street, right up the street from Hay Street. And what you talked about was the home ownership. So in this project and the things that you're talking about, would a lot of that be working for home ownership?
So I want to think, there's one thing I want to be really clear about, and I'm glad you raised the question, because I would have forgotten perhaps otherwise. I am not talking about Allentown needing more affordable housing. That's not what I'm saying. We're not. Every time I write an op-ed about affordable, about this issue, the headline says Jennings calls for more affordable. I'm not. We have more than our fair share, by far. We need better affordable housing. The housing stock in the city is squalid in many cases. I don't understand the opponents of gentrification think it's a good thing for people to be able to keep their squalor. So, you know, I mean, people, when property values go up, people who own houses get equity. That equity is a good thing, especially for people of color who have been denied it. You know, the wealth disparity is huge. So I'm not calling for more affordable housing. I'm not calling for more apartments. I'm saying that the housing stock we have has to be better if we're going to attract people who can pay the bills, who, you know, have jobs. And this is not a race issue. This is not a class issue. This is an irresponsible behavior issue. Too much of the housing stock is housing stock that nobody would want to live in except somebody who you wouldn't want to live next to. That's, like I said, that's not a race or class issue. That's a responsible behavior issue. And, you know, we've got to be much more hostile to irresponsible behavior in this city.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad this presentation, because Courtney knows, we've had conversation about this, it's like inclusionary zoning, I'm not sure I want this. And your presentation tonight touches upon so much that I was hoping could be done. Home ownership and have blocks that are just blocks here and there, that people are willing to, that our tax base goes up, kids are going, they're using our schools now, and people, they have roots. So as soon as they have roots, when you have home ownership, you have roots. You're going to stay, you're not transient. You know, inclusionary zoning, okay, so they got a break, you know, a year ago, now they're gonna move someplace else, or whatever. But I'm so glad for your presentation tonight, because it answered a lot of questions for me, and I'm not completely against inclusion zoning. He's laughing because he and I had this conversation. So he explained it better than you. Oh, okay. Thank you.
I've been doing it long enough.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Ms. Alpha. Mr. McLean.
Yeah, just a quick question, Alan. I know you've done this before, but the money that's allocated there for these renovations, how is that going to be done? Is it like you can approach the owner and say, look, if you do A, B, and C, we will pay for it, or?
You know Millie and Alex?
Oh, yeah.
She's our office person. She's the one talking to people in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, but, I mean, you guys know enough, you've done enough of this stuff that you know if a guy gives you a bill for $10,000 for a porch roof, and you know it should only cost $5,000 at the most, right?
We're gonna be all over that.
I figured, okay, that was my concern.
Yeah, I wanna make sure the money is responsibly stewarded. You know?
Right, right.
This isn't my money, this is your money, as a taxpayer or a donor. And, you know, people around me, a couple of my staff here, there's a saying, there's cheap, then there's CACLV cheap. There's CACLV cheap, man.
Okay. That was the only question.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. McLean. For my part, I would just say thank you very much for doing this presentation, Mr. Jennings. I think that there's a lot of a benefit to everything that we talked about. I think some of your proposals definitely need to be investigated and looked into. I think you brought up some very valid ideas that need to be looked into, and I can tell you for my part, I'm gonna be doing some research on it. I'm sure the administration will as well. I would certainly like to ask you and your staff, especially Ms. Canales, to maybe come back at the late summer and give us an update on how things are moving so far with the project, because I think keeping a regular open line of communication is one of the most important things that we can do, and that's certainly something that I know is important to me and to my colleagues on this committee, is making sure that this committee has open lines of communication with the public. So I appreciate that. I'm gonna see if the administration has anything that they would like to discuss or bring that up. But for myself, I just wanted to say thank you, and always to say that, you know, we're gonna have more conversations like this. We're gonna look into a lot of what you brought us today.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I thank I don't need a microphone. I thank Mr. Jennings for the update. Alan has obviously dedicated his life to this work. Just a question. You brought up the number 1,000 units, okay? Somewhere I heard along the line, 1,500 units by side.
Goody, what's it called?
Goody Clancy.
Goody Clancy
Yeah.
report says, I thought it said 1,000 units.
Okay.
That you shouldn't do anything for low moderate income
Until
people.
you get-
Until 1,000 market rate units are
Right.
in the.
And we're at 750.
And I think we're around
What's the
750.
best Okay. My second comment is on page 23. That's a younger Julio Reedy than what I know.
Where is that? Let me see.
But page 23,
No.
thank you, Mr. McLean, for pointing
Is
that
it, are you
out.
sure?
It's a pretty
By
good
the way, I
one.
just wanted to make sure, this is everything we did last year. The other document is what we did, what we've done in Allen.
Yes.
Exclusive.
Yep.
Is it old Reedy?
I appreciate that, and as I said, at any point, Mr. Jennings, when you feel you have another update to give us, please let me know, and you're always welcome to come to this committee and speak on projects that you're working on. The only question that I would then ask as well is, if you could please provide what you gave to us in an electronic format so that Mr. Hanlon can get that out to the members who were absent this evening. I think that would be beneficial.
Thank you. One last point. I know that you're not in the report anymore, but you know, we do have a public comment session that I really would love you to talk about this project to them. And see if we can influence some more, because I always thought that, and you know, I'm glad you said, to segue what you were saying, Candida, you to Courtney, is that I think that when we give those vouchers, those Section 8 vouchers that people can actually take anywhere they want to,
Right.
I think we should use some of that money to provide more homeownership. And it's a segue to do that, you know. But
We just
anyway.
need to make sure that people have the money to keep the units.
Exactly.
That one
Homeownership, I
percent.
agree 100%. Homeownership brings not only confidence to the homeowner, but also to the whole neighborhood.
I agree.
Schools,
Yes.
And in the school.
parking, even parking.
Yes.
Alleviates a lot of problems.
My only thing left is, I would just ask if there is any public comment on Mr. Jennings' presentation.
Not today.
All right, seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
And,